As one goes round the college, one can see remnants of former times. So today, Dr. David Sowby, once pupil and son of the late Warden Cedric Sowby, takes us on a short walk round some of these places of historical interest.
This is the lodge at the front gate of the college. It was here when St. Columba's moved here from Stackallen in 1849. When I came here in 1934 with my family, there was a family living in the lodge, the Pierce family. John Pierce worked in the college, and he and his wife and his son Martin, who was the college chauffeur, lived in this small house. There was a living room and at least one bedroom. There may have been a second bedroom, I don't remember. I can remember seeing Mrs. Pierce lying on her bed after she died during her wake when I was about 8 years of age. I was taken down by my parents to see her, and she was the first dead person that I ever saw. The arrangements about water and sanitary arrangements don't really bear much thought, because I don't know where the water came from, and as for the other business, one hates to think. The concrete drive here was built in 1938 under the dynamic supervision of Sidney Patterson, who was one of the masters here, and the whole school assisted with it, masters and boys. There were only boys in those days. And at this point here on the steepest part just behind me, one night, it was in June of I think 1938, someone came out and found that a section of the concrete that had been laid that morning was flowing down the hill, and an alarm had to be sent out to the whole school, masters and boys, and they all came and shoveled this concrete back at about 10 o'clock at night. Fortunately, in the middle of June, there's plenty of light for it to be done. Of course, now that the motorway is in existence, none of you will be able to walk down the drive and out the front gate, as I'm about to do now. This semicircular indentation in the wall of Marley is right opposite the front gate of the college, and was, I think, used as a turning place for coaches when they were driving up to what was the predecessor of the college, Holly Park House. The indentation was for the horses to turn in so that they could turn the carriage up into the drive up to the house. And dear old College Road is gone too. was the back gate to the college. There was a lodge here in former times, but it was removed in about 1913. I don't know which side of the gate it was on. Behind me are the playing fields named after Warden Sowby, my father. And when the sanatorium was built in 1936, this projecting bit was built specifically to house the Cullen family, who had lived so many years up in the wood. Originally, this was one of two fives courts. Eton fives was a game a bit like squash. I'm not sure whether it was played with rackets or with the hand, but at any rate, Eton fives had died out and handball became very popular. But the Eton fives had a projecting so-called pillar box made of brick as a sort of obstacle to the game. And this was a great nuisance to us handball players. So 2 or 3 of us acquired some sledgehammers somewhere around the college, and we demolished the pillar box, and we filled in the wall, the hole in the wall, with the cement that you can see today in the place where the pillar box was. And then it became a very nice handball court. This is the remains of an ice house which was here during the days before St. Columba's moved here, probably back in the 18th century. In those days, what is now the Warden's house was a very smart country house belonging to the Foote family, and presumably they used ice for cooking or some purpose like that. And ice presumably would have been cut during the winter from lakes and stored in the ice house, insulated and separated from other blocks of ice with sawdust. I've seen in Canada, in an ice house at the end of the summer, blocks of ice still there, insulated by sawdust and still existing right after the heat of the summer. I don't know where the ice would have come from, because there are no large bodies of water, certainly not in the college grounds, and it's also a little odd that it should be down here where there is obviously no source of water. So the whole thing is a little bit mysterious, but that's what it is, an ice house. I'm now standing on the site of the college's first chapel, which was built in 1849 when the college moved here from Stackallan. The chapel contained the stalls that are now in the present chapel, and oak panelling, which is now to be found in the outer hall of the Warden's house and also in the Master's Common Room. This chapel that was here was removed in 1880, and the present chapel built up above, on the terrace up above, was built instead. The chapel bell, now in the chapel, hanging up in the bell loft, was also used at the time of the first chapel, but it was in a separate housing up on the upper level, and in turn that bell had been taken here from Stackallan when the college moved from there. It was presented to the college by the first warden, who apparently used his first year's salary to pay for it as a present to the college. Now I'm going to take this stick and I'm going to try and dig up the the remains of the stone cross marking the altar of the first chapel. In former times, the college chapel organ was powered by water pressure, with water which was taken from the swimming pool up in the deer park, where the golf course now is. And behind the chapel there's a valve which can be turned on and off to let water in and out by the key which is at the top of the cloisters. That key could also be used for turning water from the swimming pool into the tanks in the cock loft or into the hoses which the fire brigade used both at practice times and once or twice in real life when there were actual fires in the kitchen and in the turf shed down in the yard. A scorched wooden beam with a plaque commemorates the fire that occurred on December the 7th, 1896. The fire started in the big schoolroom and spread to the new building where the Cadogan is now, and eventually gutted both buildings. It then destroyed the so-called old schoolroom, which it was a wooden building that formerly connected the top of cloisters with the big schoolroom. Just as it was taking hold on cloisters, the wind changed to the east, and in the words on the plaque, Hoc loco flammas sedavit Deus. In this place, God stopped the flames. I don't seem to be as strong as I used to be. I think it's probably rusted up, actually. This metal lid here is the top of a coal chute through which coal was sent down into the furnace room. In those days, the chapel was heated by a separate coal furnace which lies at the bottom of this chute. There's also steps around the corner where people could go down into the furnace room. This is the remains of the water house which collected water from the stream which flowed down through the deer park and the wood, and it was used apparently at one time to flush the toilets that used to be out on the other side of Cadogan, roughly where the south wall of the library now is. There was a charming little waterfall that flowed out over the stone at the far side there, which made a very nice sound for those of us who were in the dormitories in Cadogan. Believe it or not, a family of 5 lived in this building. Originally, it was the site of a plunge pool which was built in 1850 for the boys, and when the second chapel was built in 1880, it was covered over to form a cabin for the clerk of the works in charge of the building. Subsequently, a family called Cullen moved in there, and Mr. and Mrs. Cullen with their 3 children lived there until they were moved to the building at the back of the sanatorium, now the Orpen building, where they were a lot more comfortable than they were here. They got their water supply directly out of the stream which flows past the house and carries on down into the sheep dip and then into the waterhouse just outside Cadogan. Their fuel was gathered daily from sticks garnered in the wood and wheeled home in a small homemade truck. Behind me is the wreckage of 2 houses, Iona and Derrydown, that were built after the war to accommodate married masters. The first occupants, I think, were Stephen Tothill and his wife, and Sean Brooks and his wife. And the most recent occupants were Adrian Summerfield and the Cairds, and before them Norman and Joyce Lush. These houses were built by a sum of money provided by Sir Stanley Cochrane, who also gave money for the building of the swimming pool. That was back in 1947. So they've lasted all this time, and now they have to give way to progress, and the M50 will go through here, and the remains of this will all be taken away, and now this is simply part of the college history.